Posting. Oh, right. Now we are on air, according to this.
Oh my god.
Except, where are we on air? Anyway, because I think this is recording, let me say hello. My name is Shane Melaugh,
Hello, my name is Paul McCarthy.
and this is the I'm Impact podcast, episode 3. This is live, I think, and
Visual Ugly Edition. This is where you get to look at our ugly faces.
which is what you've always wanted. Anyway, let me see. There's supposed to be something happening here on my YouTube channel. All right. So having said that, and I guess I'm gonna switch back and forth between this sometimes. Never mind. Having said that, what we actually want to talk about on today's episode, the actual content, is as follows. Basically, Paul, you had this. You told me this thing. I think a few days ago. You told me how you'd kind of found something that motivates you again. And just as a quick intro to that, I think anyone who's ever done this, anything entrepreneurial really, if you're doing something where you build your own business, and you don't have the boss breathing down your neck and all that, one of the big issues you have to deal with is essentially motivation or drive really. The question is, how much drive do you have to do the stuff that you need to do to grow your business and you need to do to reach your goals. And personally, I've really seen two extremes of that and everything in between. So I've been everywhere from completely lethargic, not barely being able to get myself out of bed in the morning. Seriously, I mean, just in terms of just being so unmotivated that I just couldn't get myself to do any work, and I don't know, played video games all day or
Just,
just
just,
wasted my time.
just out of interest,
Mm.
what were the circumstances behind that? What I can't imagine you being like that. Why were you feeling so lethargic?
Um, See, it's hard to say. I mean, generally, I would say it's a combination of a lack of clear vision, but also just shit going wrong.
Hmm.
If it's just if things just aren't going great, and sometimes it's something I bring upon myself, and sometimes it's just bad luck. But usually, when I'm unmotivated, it has to do with just also being in a generally bad mood.
Hmm. Yeah,
But
I
anyway,
can
as I said,
understand.
that's like one extreme that I've been at, and I've also been at the other extreme where I basically overdid it, where I was just, without exaggerating, getting up early in the morning and just working, working, working until I went to bed at night. The only interruptions were when my stomach started to rumble, and I decided, okay, I have to shove some food in my face just to be able to concentrate again. And I've done that for like days and weeks on end, which is also not a very healthy lifestyle.
Yeah.
And then the question is, where does this come from, right? Why are we sometimes so driven and so motivated to work on our stuff, and sometimes it can be so difficult? And so, can you quickly kind of recap um, what your story was there?
Well, originally, I found myself at one end of the spectrum where I was so driven like crazy, where I was getting up. I mean, I remember I went for a stage. I did a test basically of 2 months, just getting up at 5:30 a.m. I found myself more productive really early in the morning. That's another podcast in itself because I really don't understand why that is, but that's definitely true. But anyway, I went through a period of about 2 months where I was flat out working every day, and I really had focus. I really had drive, and everything was in place. I was making so much progress, and what I realized at the time is I had a really driving why, and at that point in my life, I was not enjoying. I was working a job at the time, and so that obviously gave me a kick up the arse. Nobody wants to be doing that. I mean, some people
Sure.
obviously do. Some people are driven by that kind of stuff, but for me, it was always a case of I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I wanted to break free, and that was one clear why. I mean, every time I started doing some work, in the back of my mind, I was like, I'm doing this because I don't want to be
Right.
answering to a boss, just following instructions. I want to make my own stuff. I know I've got more in me than what I'm doing in my job,
Right.
and
And
that
just to clarify, that's a why in the sense of why am I doing this, right?
Why am I doing this?
Yeah.
Exactly. And I had another clear why in that I'd really wanted to see a bit of the world, see a bit of Europe to begin with, and I knew that if you created something online, you could essentially do that, especially if you're developing software or making information products. There's no reason why you can't live and travel on the move, which is essentially what we're doing now.
Yeah.
And that it leads me to the part of the problem, because I did leave the job essentially as things started to take place, things started to happen, and I started to get further and further. I started to achieve goals and things like that, and I started to get what I originally set out to achieve. And now I'm sat here. It looks like we're in different countries right now, but actually I could go through. In fact, I'm just going to do that.
Yeah, he's just gonna hop on a plane real quick. Just to prove we're not lying. Right. Now.
So that's another cool bit of the podcast. I can now give you a punch if you piss me off.
Right. Yeah. Also, cue the gay jokes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's not like that. I explained that in the first podcast, but for those who weren't listening. So yeah, one of the things is I wanted to travel around Europe. I'm doing that with Shane now, and I don't really have a job like I used to have. We're more of an entrepreneurial partnership going forward. So for me, two of those points were just ticked off, and then I was like, I just went through a period of about 6 weeks where you and I were just not working like we should, and we kept saying, this is not good. This is really not good. We need to figure this out, and then we go out party again, or we go dancing or something like that. we were down in the gym the other day, and I remember talking to you, and I was like, Shane, I need to figure out my why, because honestly, Ferraris, I don't know, all the cliche stuff that people work for, millions of dollars. That I look at that, like, just doesn't turn me on. It doesn't make me want to work. And I was trying to figure out what it is to get. I needed a new why, basically.
Yeah, and just I can also say that I have the same thing. Like, I mean, the typical thing, the typical imagery you see when I want to be an entrepreneur. Obviously, I want to be successful. I want to make lots of money. Is you have this kind of imagery, as you said, expensive cars, hanging out on the beach for however long you want, maybe have a nice house and stuff like that. And I also find that this is just, it doesn't motivate me at all. Like, I couldn't care less. I just couldn't care less. So I've also found that just the idea of making lots of money or buying nice things with that money does not get me out of bed in the morning.
Yeah. And we both have similar objectives in some regards, in that we both want to give back to our parents. We both have this goal to give something specific back to our parents, but that goal is so flipping far away. It's not enough of a why. I think it's a very big why, but it's too far away. It's something that realistically we won't achieve in the next year.
Yeah.
And you need something closer. You need something
exactly.
not so conceptual as well. Not so we'll just do that for my parents a couple of years down the line. There's no real detail behind it, nothing specific behind it. And so what I started doing, and it took me ages to figure this out, but I started to actually vision the products that we've created. I started to actually vision them complete, sat out there, in perfect working order, customers happy with them, and making sales on a daily basis. And these are the products we have in development. We have so many, don't we? That's the real issue. There's just so much going on now. And whereas before, when I didn't have my whys, I was looking at these products and thinking, oh man, I don't know how we're going to get all this support done. I don't know how all these bugs are just racking up in my Asana. And I was just looking at it, I was feeling overwhelmed. But then if I take one product and I picture that complete, and I picture that absolutely polished off in the corner, done, making money, that started to then bring it home to me that could be achieved in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah.
That could be a month solid work, that could be ready, and how much better would it be knowing that that's done? And just picturing that made the world of difference to my motivation.
Yeah. And yeah, I think, I mean, and I have the same thing. So what's interesting to me about that is that quite early on in the beginning of my IM career, or whatever you want to call it, I had something very similar where I was in the position that I think a lot of people who come in through this internet marketing angle are in. You know, they see all of these possibilities. They go, okay, I could start a blog and try to monetize that somehow. I could uh, sell software, sell information products, build websites and monetize them with advertising. Uh, I could offer a service and so on and so forth, right? There's so many things you could potentially be doing. And it's like, okay, what do I do? Where do I start? And I was kind of floating around there a little bit. And one thing that goes with that is uncertainty, right? Because you go, okay, so apparently maybe I can start a blog and gain a following and then make some money somehow, but maybe not, right? Does that
Mm.
really work?
Mm.
And so, for example, looking at blogs, I often found like, okay, what's really going on here? Because sometimes you can look at super popular blogs and it's like the content is kind of lame and
Mm.
fluffy and
Mm.
it seems to be nothing going on. And then some of the greatest blogs ever are have a tiny following, nothing going on. So
Yeah.
it seems like how can I know whether my blog is going to be successful?
Yeah.
Because I can't really tell, you know, clearly, yeah, if you just write awesome content, you have a successful blog. No, that's
Yeah.
clearly not how it works.
That's actually a very good point because when I was doing niche sites to begin with, I didn't really know if what the effort I was putting in I was ever going to get back. Yeah, I
Mm,
didn't really know. I know there's this concept of a dip, right?
mm,
You work hard, and there's always going to be a point where you're in a deficit,
mm.
where you've done a shed load of work and you haven't got anything back at all, anything to show for it, and then it goes through. But there's some projects where the dip just never ends because you've just made a bad decision.
Yeah,
For instance, you've just created a niche site in a niche where you get 200 visitors a day, but nobody buys shit
yeah,
basically. And I was figured out so how can I come up with a process so that I know that if I put enough time and effort in, I know the dip will surface in the end. And I
yeah,
came up with that process, and that made a world of difference and changed my perspective on niche sites. And
right,
it was simply a case of making sure that the traffic was monetizable, and then
yeah,
I knew all I had to do was make sure I got the traffic.
right, exactly. So, yeah, so that's how you eliminate that uncertainty, right? And so I had the same issue where, yeah, most of the things I saw, here's what you can do, here's what you can do, there was this level of uncertainty. But I remember I was kind of starting to see the matrix in terms of I was starting to see, a level deeper. So I remember quite distinctly, I was starting to notice, okay, here are a few people or a few companies who seem to be doing well, and they're selling stuff and starting to see how it works. So you can see, okay, here's a company, they have this service they're offering, then they have this blog that where they talk about related stuff. Then they have some freebie that they give away, or maybe multiple freebies. They release reports, and I can start seeing how all of these traffic funnels then go down into their service, and they have multiple levels of service and so on. I can start to see how the machine kind of works,
Mm.
and then the same thing for I can remember seeing someone's sales funnel because I looked at the product, had a question about this product. So I did some research. I found their homepage. I saw that they also sold a few other products. I sent them a question about one of their products. And in the reply, they were like, yeah, maybe this product isn't the right one for you, but check out this other thing. Here's a special offer for it.
Mm.
So I could see how they had almost, this little web of products, and they had, a fitting solution um, for many different options. And they also had free stuff and so on. And I remember looking at that and thinking, there's no way you could set all that up and not make money.
Hmm.
There's no way you could set up, um, you know, a bunch of freebie offers, a bunch of compelling freebies that lead to other products, that lead to greater products, and maybe some membership or coaching offer in the back end. There's
Mm.
no way you could set up that entire funnel
Mm.
and not make any money. That's
Right.
practically impossible, right? You'd have to somehow make sure that all your sites stay de-indexed or something. Because even if you do almost no promotion, people would trickle in through all that content you have, and people would somehow end up buying your stuff.
Right.
And of course, in reality, you build this up gradually and you promote every step along the way. So once you actually get there, so this is something that kind of clicked for me. Once you actually get there, once you have all of this set up, no way you're not making money.
Yeah.
And that was for me also a very important turning point where I just was like, okay, so that's what I'm going to do. And I started making my first freebie.
So the next question is, you found this process where you're pretty sure, or you're 100% sure that if you set this up, you're going to make money.
Mm-hmm.
But then you take a step back and you look at it and you think, blimey, this shit's going to take me 3 years to set up.
Yeah.
How do you then put yourself in a mindset where you're like, okay, it's going to take me 3 years or whatever, but what do you focus on to make yourself? I'd really like to ask this question to a lot of people, especially a lot of bloggers, because one thing that I've struggled with is some things you just have to keep doing and there's no real end goal. For instance, vlogging.
Yeah.
You take all the blogs out there, smartpassiveincome.com, Pat Flynn, he just produces content all the time, great stuff. But for me, I like having an end point where, like a product, get it out, done.
Yeah.
Go out, celebrate, start a new thing. So how do you put yourself in a mindset to do something that's continuous like that? That's one thing I haven't really figured out.
Well, I think it's going to be a matter of milestones for sure. It's going to be a question of can you you have to kind of break it down into stuff that you want to see, right? You have to break it down into, because even if you're blogging, you have to take it one step at a time. You have to be like, okay, now I'm working on this next blog post.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I think that's very, very important there. It reminds me. I read something about, as you know, I'm a bit of I wouldn't call myself a huge fan, but I follow mixed martial arts a little bit, right?
Mm.
And one of the big names in mixed martial arts, probably one of the most well-known fighters, is Georges St. Pierre, also known as GSP, and he's just a guy who's been winning a lot of fights for a long time. And he's one of the things I read about him just briefly is that he also had like a motivation issue in his career, because very early on, I think he kind of decided that his thing is that he wants to be like a fighter on a completely different level, right? He wants to be a game-changing fighter. He doesn't just want to win his fights. He doesn't just want to be the champion in his weight class and keep that belt for as long as possible. He officially states, I want to push this to the next level. I want people to kind of have to move up a level in their whole training and their whole approach to this sport to even be able to consider competing against me, which is very, very ambitious, right? But then apparently he also had motivation issues, and one of the things that allegedly I read about this, that his sports psychologist or whatever told him is to kind of refocus on the next step and just to refocus on this next fight, this next training session. Because sometimes, and I think that's the tricky thing, is sometimes having like this super ambitious, distant goal can be very, very useful, but it can also be almost a distraction. It can also be almost have negative consequences, because if it's too far out of reach, you're like, well, it doesn't matter whether I start working on this today or tomorrow. It's going to take forever to get there anyway. So I think you have to find a balance between focusing on some kind of a big, ambitious, long-term goal and focusing on the next thing, the next step.
Right. Mm-hmm. And the other thing that struck me the other day when I was thinking about this, instead of focusing on the benefits that come from achieving something, focus on the tasks that you want that will most certainly get the benefits in the end. So instead of thinking, oh great, I'm gonna release this product and earn, I don't know, $50,000, let's say, for example, instead of focusing on the money, focus on the tasks that you need to get the product out there and complete, and don't even think about the benefits that come at the end. Just that's something that helps me, because the benefit is uncertainty, but the one thing that is certain is that if you get these tasks complete, if you get this project done, it's going to be sat there and it's going to be an asset for you.
Yeah, exactly. And that's also something that I alluded to in my last blog post, where this is also something that's kind of that I often think about is that, I'm here, I have goals, they're out there basically, and there is a theoretical sequence of steps or a sequence of events that gets me from where I am now to having achieved that goal.
Mm-hmm.
And assuming that the goal is at least moderately realistic. Obviously, if my goal is to be a trillionaire living on Mars, then there's still a sequence of steps that could be taken towards that goal, but it's just highly unlikely that that it'd be possible. But if you have a goal like I want to get more traffic to my website, or I want to make a living selling my own products or whatever, that's a very, very achievable goal, and there's really no reason why you shouldn't be able to do that. It's just a question of, essentially, you can think of it as like multiple paths branching out from where you're standing right now. And every time you make a decision to take an action or not take an action, you follow one of the possible branches, right? And one of the possible branches leads to, I don't know, you sitting on your couch being overweight eating potato chips, because that's every decision you ever made is, I'll eat some more potato chips.
Mm.
And another one of those branches, if you make the right decisions, if you take the right steps, leads to, hey, here's my finished product and people are buying it.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's something that I think this is something that kind of helps me focus, is that I just think, look, I'm here on this path, and it's really just about taking the next step in the right direction, and you keep taking it step by step until the thing is done.
You and I seem to respond pretty well to deadlines as well. I mean, there's no
Yeah.
doubt the amount of work we do in any given week is not like this.
Yeah.
If we set a deadline, let's say on Monday, we say, right, let's get this damn thing finished by Friday. Man, we put in some hours that week.
Yeah.
I remember when we were launching one of the products, I can't remember, I think it was Hybrid Connect.
Mhm.
And on Monday we said, let's launch this thing on Friday. Flipping heck, you don't even think about all the stuff that he's doing.
Yeah.
And we were working until 3-4 o'clock in the morning to get that stuff done. A deadline can really, if you use it correctly, just really help you with the motivation and getting stuff done.
Yeah, it has to be a short-term deadline though, otherwise it doesn't really work.
Yeah.
Because one of the things is that you underestimate the amount of work that needs to be done. That's something that always strikes me as strange. Like with something like creating and selling a product.
Mm-hmm.
The crazy thing is that when you think I'm about 95% done,
yeah,
there's about 90% more work to do. It's like it seems to me that those last 5% can swallow up so much time.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, and this little thing needs to be done, and that needs to be done, and that this can take hours.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the same is true. The same, for example, is true sometimes. I notice this with video, where you're like, oh, I've written the script, I've done recording, I'm almost done, but actually, just cutting the video, converting it, uploading it, checking that it's right, and so on, can take hours and hours of time, even just that. So, yeah, it's often deceptive, and I think that's one reason why deadlines work, because otherwise you're like, yeah, I'm just going to do a bit of work, and then and you leave it whenever you feel like leaving it. And what happens then is you think, oh, I'm 95% finished, it'll be done by tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next day you think, oh, I guess not, it'll be done by tomorrow, and so on. And so it's just 2 weeks delayed in the end.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you have a deadline, you just go, oh, I guess I'm not going to get any sleep tonight, and just get it done.
Prime example of that is today for me. I mean, my to-do list had about 10 items on it. I'm still on the second.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought this was going to be a 30-minute fix, but I've been working on this for like 6 hours today, and I still haven't got it complete. And just some things you can't foresee, which is exactly why deadlines just get blown out of the water every now and then.
Yeah. All right. So let me see. I'm not sure if we've covered everything really, because what we have is basically, can you summarize what for you works right now to keep your drive alive?
Right now, we have a load of products in the pipeline, right?
Yeah.
And if I started to try and look at each one of those and sat down and start mapping out a process that sees me through till January or February next year, I'm going to jump off the balcony. Because there is so much work to be done. It's overwhelming. There's an overwhelming amount of work that needs to be done. So all I'm focusing on is that next product and just picturing it sat there completed, where we're happy with the product, and that's what's getting me going, and that's a finite goal for me. So I'm that's essentially every time I lose a bit of motivation, I just start thinking about that. Whereas before, it was all about, let's say a couple of weeks ago when I lost my motivation, I was thinking more about trying to picture myself or picture my life in a couple of years, how it would be better from what it is now if I worked hard for the next 2 years. And it was a completely different way of looking at it. And then I also had this kind of distant goal of helping my parents out with something specific in 5 to 10 years. And neither of those were really getting me to sit down. And I think one of the problems with that first vision that I had of how my life would be better in a couple of years if we make this more successful is that I immediately think about how far that is from where I am now, and that immediately takes me back to how much work that needs to be done, how many problems we have, and how we're going to overcome all these question marks that actually, if you break them down one by one, we'll get there. If we focus on, or if I focus on this next product that's going to take the next 2 to 4 weeks, and I focus on that being absolutely complete, for me that seems to work. But I've noticed that I don't think this is right for everybody, because some things really motivate people and they just don't mean squat to me, and I'm sure it's a subjective thing. And what about you? I mean, are you exactly the same as me, or what is really the thing that gets you motivated?
Yeah, I think, as you said, I think that one of the things is that you kind of have to find the buttons that you can push that work for yourself, and that's not going to be the same for everyone. Now, I think for me it's very similar, yeah. It's very similar, but what makes a big difference for me is that this is especially with information products, which with software products, the problem is that I'm not in charge of the entire process, right? Because I don't do the programming myself and so on. With information products, I think one of the reasons I never found it very difficult to complete information products is that as I start planning it out, I very quickly have like a vision of what the finished product will look like from beginning to end, and that really helps me. I mean, that's in that sense, I think we are the same. That it really helps me to just have this kind of vision in my head. This is what it's going to look like. This is how awesome it's going to be. And I kind of envision how the members area will look like, how people will access this content, and so on. And then I'm just driven by making every part of it as good as I can. But with other things, especially, I mean, my goal is to get to the point where I'm not doing all of the work. I mean, with an info product, the good thing is that I can do everything myself. Bad thing is that I have to do everything myself. And I want to get to the point where I can be selling. Well, really, I want to get to the point where I'm basically running a larger company, I mean, larger than 2 people, and where I would be in charge of strategy and delegation more than grunt work, essentially. And so I can't use that same thing to motivate me. And for me, it's also, I have to kind of find a mixture between a larger vision of where I want to go, but also a next step to focus on, and ultimately, breaking it down into a bunch of tasks. Because the thing is, what I find is that if you break down whatever you want to do into a short list of tasks, making sure that each task is in itself fairly easy. So any task that would take too long or that's kind of too big, you want to break down into subtasks. Then you don't need that much drive to work on that, right? Because it's like, oh, this little thing I can do in half an hour. I'm just going to do it. Even if I'm not super motivated, even if I'm not psyched up and pumped up to do this, I'm going to finish that little task because I got to do something, right? So I think that's also in terms of, it's almost like a question of task management to a certain degree. If you do your task management right, then you don't need that much drive.
Yeah, that's something I noticed quite a while ago with Asana. And this is basically the thing I use to keep my to-do list. And I mean, you can actually have one step which is like finish a product. That's like 250 hours work. You could put that one line in Asana as like one task. But you can break that down as far as you like, almost to the point where make this one change on this page. Okay, ticked it off. Next, and you start getting on a roll, and you start wrapping through your tasks. But the other thing I want to talk to you about, we're probably going over, but screw it,
Yeah.
whatever. Um,
Okay.
let's take internet marketing and just get rid of it for now, and business,
Okay.
get rid of that too. Let's
Yeah.
talk about, for instance, we go down the gym 3 times a week,
Yeah.
and there's times when we're at the gym and we're struggling to see,
Yes.
we're struggling to move on. You hit
Yes.
plateaus and we're struggling to figure out. I mean, the misinformation out there online is crazy, and we're having to test, and we're having to. Sometimes we'll be in the gym pumping the crap out of ourselves for 3 months, and we might not put more
Yeah.
than 5K on the bar, so the results
Yeah.
are
And
minimal.
yeah, and also, I mean, I think just to clarify, one of the things I think also about the workout we do is that it's a pretty damn hard workout. Like it's
Yeah.
it's often because essentially we lift heavy weights, right? We lift heavy, and so it's not, I think there's a big difference between a workout where you do a bit of cardio and then you do a bunch of high rep exercises. It's like getting under that bar where there's more weight on the bar now than you've ever lifted before, and having to squat that thing 5 times is psychologically it's a lot harder than doing 12 bicep curls.
Yeah, and then you realize you got another 4 sets to come after that of the same
Right.
thing.
Right. So it is really something where you have existential moments where you're like, what's the meaning of life? And does it include having to do this?
Yeah, especially as your body's falling apart this last week.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, just out of interest for you, what? Because I think it's much bigger than just internet marketing and business.
Mm-hmm.
What's driving you for that? I mean, what's your why?
Yeah, gosh, if I knew, that's actually a good question. I'm not entirely sure, but it's something where, hmm,
Because it's not. Most people go down gym. I'd imagine the reason they do it is because they want to look good for the ladies when they go walking on the beach. That's
yeah,
that's a guy perspective,
yeah,
I would say.
yeah, and I'm sure for women it's the same thing. I mean,
Right?
I
Yeah, they
want to
want to
look
look
good naked, right?
right.
Now, that's, I mean, for me, that's not a huge motivation, and I think the problem with that is also that I think it would put you in a yo-yo if it's like that, right?
Hmm.
Because you'd work out until you look at yourself in the mirror and you're like, oh, that's okay. Now I can get out the chocolate bars, right?
Yeah, I guess so.
But so, and certainly that's not my biggest drive, and yeah, I don't know. That's certainly not my biggest drive, especially since I mean I spent years working out, making basically no visible progress, and I still think I mean don't I don't feel like I have the genetics to be the kind of guy who goes and lifts a few weights and then looks like the Hulk all of a
Yeah,
sudden.
yeah. I mean, having said that, though, you've doubled most of your lifts
Mm,
over the last year and a half.
mm.
So you're definitely making progress.
Sure, yeah,
I, I, I might try and answer this question for you.
yeah. Go ahead.
I think the reason you're motivated, I think we did have a discussion about this, is that you like doing things. You like challenge yourself to do things that most people are unable or don't
Yes.
have the discipline to follow through on.
Yes, that's actually, yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, we did talk about that. Yeah, I think that's so for me. Yeah, that's very good points. For me, a very strong trigger is basically non-conformity. So for some reason, I hate being average, and I hate feeling that I'm average, right? So and it's true, but I actually forgotten about that right now. It's true that like one of the things that can really motivate me is if I essentially think, an average person wouldn't work this hard. An average person wouldn't take this risk. An average person would, feel like I'm just not going to do what's average. And so it's the same thing. The average person doesn't work out with this kind of discipline. It doesn't work out this hard. That's why I do it. And to slightly expand on that, I read a quote somewhere at some point. I can't remember it. It was kind of longer paragraph type thing, but it's basically someone was saying, look, here's the thing. I I started getting up at 5 a.m. every morning, going for a run. I go to the gym 3 times a week. I make sure I only eat healthy. I make sure that I don't watch any TV, and I make sure that I don't spend all day in front of the computer. I make sure that time I spend in front of the computer is spent mostly doing productive stuff. And with just these things, I'm already so far ahead of the curve of almost everyone else. You can't imagine how different my life is from yours. And that's something that, this is, although this is, I kind of read that and that resonated with me very, very strongly. Like that's something that drives me. Just the idea that, look, I can have a specific set of habits and I can do a specific set of things that most people are unwilling to do. And what happens is that puts me so far ahead of the curve already. And I'm so far ahead of everyone else just by doing these few things, just by being willing to do what most people are not willing to do.
Yeah. This is the kind of thought pattern that I can concur with as well. This is why we're quite similar in many ways, because I'm pretty non-conformist too. And it's half the reason why each time we decide we want to move on, I always say, right, okay, what would a normal person do? Right, let's not do that.
Yeah.
I can't even tell you why. That's what drives me. I can't even articulate it like you can. It's just something that I want to be different from the crowd.
Yeah, and I think that's and that's something where I'm sure that doesn't work for everyone. I'm sure it's not a big motivation for everyone. Oh, I want to be different. But we've kind of found something that works for us there, and yeah, I think that's probably a decent conclusion to all this. Is that definitely try the stuff we talked about, but make sure that you have to kind of start probing and find stuff that motivates you. And one of the ways to do that is to look at things that you actually do on a regular basis. So in this, it could be, well, I have trouble motivating myself to work on my business, but I do go to the gym. So why do I go to the gym? Find kind of the reason there, try to dig deep and find the emotional triggers there, and then try to apply them to the other thing.
Well, that's a good way of doing it, actually. And just to say quickly, it took me a long time to figure out something that's really working for me. I had it nailed before, but then my life changed quite drastically. I came out here, started living with you. We got this thing of traveling around Europe while we're doing the work, basically, and it suddenly just obliterated my whys. So,
which is a good way to go, right?
Oh yeah, it's good. I guess it was just evolution for me.
Yeah,
to
exactly.
go from one step to the next, and it took me a while to figure it out. And during those 6 weeks or whatever, I had a good time. I learned how to dance. Drunk too much. I've raced you too many times, but yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
That's a good way to go. Anyway, so that's it. I think that concludes our podcast today. Let me quickly try the screen sharing thing again. Where is it? Here, this will be good for the video as well.
Oh wow!
This is how you can follow me everywhere.
This is nuts.
Social stuff. Anyway, so I don't think we had actually any live viewers. I'll have to make sure that we actually get some, Twitter followers and Facebook people and so on, because it would be kind of cool if I could make a tweet and people actually saw it.
Yeah, and what would be really great is if people actually chimed in and asked us questions, and then we could just rap about it.
Yeah, that's the goal. But I mean, we can, I guess for next week, we could just send out an email, and we're pretty sure that we get some people on that. I didn't send an email today deliberately because I wasn't sure if this was going to work at all.
Yeah.
All right. So that concludes the I'm Impact Podcast episode 3. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you soon.
Goodbye.